Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, coming back with another live stream tonight. It's 8:30 Eastern time. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe as we bring you the best bloggers, broadcasters, and writers in the industry, including analysis from myself. And of course, the audio you can catch on Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. Just search Mark Rogers TV. So we've got Iowa State, of course, the Cinderella of the Big 12 in 2017, finishing off with a bowl win and an 8-5 campaign with no games under their belts because of the big lightning delay against South Dakota State, now having to travel and go to one of the tougher places to play in the country, Kinnick Stadium, against the Iowa Hawkeyes. We've got Corey Peters on the line from Big 12 Country.
Hey, guys.
Corey, how you doing tonight?
Great. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing just fine. So this Iowa State football team, I projected to be somewhere in the same class as they were last year, had some pretty substantial losses, but bring back a number of key players as well. So first of all, they lose the game against South Dakota State, which hopefully won't cost them a chance to get to postseason play as it did, for example, Georgia Tech in losing one of its games last year in only playing 11. Your thoughts about the missed game? There didn't appear to be much efforts to make it good, whether that be later in the season or the next day, as Nebraska tried to do against Akron in missing its first game.
I haven't heard many reports. Just as you said, there hasn't been much talk. I don't think that if Iowa State, Matt Campbell decides to reschedule it, it would be against South Dakota State. I think they may find one of the other teams that was also canceled and try to do it, like maybe a week 13, whenever, or not week 13, whenever bowl championship week or the week between, like such as when the Army-Navy game is played, is what I've heard a lot of speculation going on. And one of the best ideas that I've seen was actually playing Nebraska, have an old Big 8 matchup. And to be honest, a lot of people are saying that Nebraska would be stupid to do that, and they're probably right.
Nebraska would be stupid to do it because of risking a loss?
Yes.
Well, certainly both teams would be risking a loss. That's why you play football. But, yeah, Iowa State might be a little bit better. I think they're pretty much in the same ballpark. I would expect Nebraska to improve substantially this year. But I guess it looks worse for Nebraska, even though Iowa State's a little bit better right now in actuality. Just from a brand name, it looks worse for Nebraska to lose a game, I guess. But I would be all for that. It's just another interesting game on the college football landscape to see played. So we had a number of suspensions. They don't seem to be much of a factor at this point, and there's little backing in terms of what necessarily is going to be the conclusion of some of these freshmen who were suspended about 2 weeks ago. So let's cut right to the chase in terms of this Iowa State football team with the quarterback back in play, Kyle Kempt, who obviously hit the scene against Oklahoma, lit them up for about 360 yards through the air, carried that out into a very productive season in which he only threw 3 or 4 interceptions. Your thoughts about Kempt and whether what we saw in 2017 is the real deal?
I am very excited to see him come back. I was super happy whenever the news was announced that he got his year of eligibility back from the NCAA because he was fighting it during the offseason. And it came back about a month before season, 2 months before the season, that he was going to be able to come back again. And I think I look to him to improve on what he did last year. Like you said, I mean, he was trial by fire for sure with his first game being against Oklahoma in Norman and pulled it out, had a great showing. I was actually at that game. Looked like he had been doing it all season long for, 3 years. Like he's a senior this year. He looked like he had been playing for all 3 years. And that's a big step in the right direction for Iowa State to have their quarterback back this year. As Matt Campbell, it gives Matt Campbell a lot more room to work with because he's got a guy who's been there and done that behind there. And the fact that we still have David Montgomery, who is just a wrecking crew by himself. And I'm excited to see. There's a lot of hype about him, and I buy into it, obviously, for a reason. I think he was the best back in the Big 12 last year, and I think he's poised to do it again. He may end up in New York. I don't know if he will because there's a little bit of bias there with him playing for Iowa State, although we've seen a lot of lower tier teams have some guys reach New York, and I would love to see him end up doing that.
Yeah, we got Corey Peters on the line from Big 12 Country. We've had a number of their contributors on doing some fine work for us, setting us up with Big 12 play here in 2018 and what was supposed to be a second game for Iowa State, one under their belts. And if the adage holds true that a team typically improves the most from game one to game two, which makes a whole lot of sense, that they're at a bit of a disadvantage in going to Iowa. Two very evenly matched teams. The Hawkeyes won the matchup in Ames last year, 44-41 in overtime. Yeah, you mentioned David Montgomery, and when I failed to mention or name him to my top 10 running backs in the nation, my goodness, with some people commenting, I would have thought that I, robbed a bank or a children's hospital or something, because people weren't too happy with me, even when I said he was just outside of my top 10. But this guy's a special kid that if you look back on what he's produced in 2016, he had a great stretch run to set up 2017. He got off to a nice start, but for most of 2017, it wasn't a great season. Obviously, a back success tied to the offensive line as well.
Absolutely. That was going to be my first point if you didn't bring it up, that Iowa State had a good offensive line last year who had some experienced guys, especially left tackle Jake Campos, who has moved on to the NFL now. But he, as you said, didn't have a spectacular season. But from what I saw, there were flashes and glimpses in every single game of greatness that could be if he just not so much matures because he's already been there. But the more work he gets under his belt, the more he's going to be able to put out. The offensive line this year is my biggest area of concern for the offense, as it usually is, to be honest. And moving, who played center last year, Julian Good-Jones, is taking Jake Campos's former left tackle spot. That's going to be a rough transition. And that's the number one thing that I wanted to look at in this first game, was to see how the offensive line meshed with a redshirt freshman at left guard and a redshirt sophomore at center. Neither one had ever had a start under their belt before.
Get Corey Peters on the line talking up Big 12 football. He is from Big 12 country, so it makes sense. Iowa State, obviously a factor in the Big 12. We would expect this year after a surprise season, 8-5, and it wasn't so much just the 8-5 season. It was beating Oklahoma and TCU, the two championship game participants, and then extending that to postseason play and taking out what was a top 25 team in Memphis at the Liberty Bowl. So the rest of the offense, you mentioned the offensive line, and we got to wait and see whether that unit's improved. Alan Lazard no longer there. Your thoughts about the wide receiver core?
It is going to be a deep core. Well, not so much as deep as other places like Oklahoma State, for instance, but the talent level across the board is very good for what Iowa State usually has. Hakeem Butler was the number 2 target last year after you mentioned Alan Lazard, and he has just flourished and stepped right into his role through camp, both spring and fall camp, and then being able to perform in practice to where everyone is raving about him, including his other players. And another is Deshaunte Jones, who is every single game I talk about him in the preview, and you never know what you're going to get out of him. Not that he doesn't perform sometimes, just he's not used because they don't need him. He's the guy that I say that bails Kyle Kemp out, because if the defense they're playing to stop in the run, all he has to do, if they need a third and short situation, Deshaunte Jones across the middle, and he does that every single time. He did it so many times last year. He is always, always there for 5 yards if they need it. He finds a way to get open, and as he showed in the first, their only one of 2 drives, I believe, that they had, he also has amazing breakaway speed in the 55-yard touchdown that he had down the sideline.
So we've got Iowa State getting it on. I believe that game's going to be played in Iowa.
Yes, sir.
So anyway, Kinnick Stadium is the site for the ball game with the Hawkeyes taking on the Cyclones. And we've got Corey Peters on the line. You can join him at Big 12 Country in recent months, and certainly leading right into the season after media days. Number of contributors joining us from Big 12 Country that did a heck of a job helping us out on the Big 12.
We appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Definitely. And your thoughts about the Hawkeyes? Have you seen them play? Obviously, they only have the one in the book, but going back to last season, everyone remembers the most talked about game in college football because it changed the trajectory of the college football playoff was the shellacking of Ohio State. I mentioned off the top the exciting game in overtime in Ames against the Cyclones, 44-41. And they almost beat Saquon Barkley. That one went right down to the wire as well.
I am still hurting every time somebody brings up that game last year.
Sorry, I've done it twice.
Well, we got to talk about it. That's what we're here to talk about this week anyway. It's Cyhawk week. It was a heart wrencher. I thought we had it for 3 quarters, but as I said in my report on Big12Country.com after the game, they just didn't have the experience on defense to keep up, and they were also seemed gassed was the problem. This season, it's going to be a bit different. Iowa returns Nate Stanley, who was their passer last year. One note about him is that he overthrew about 3 could have been touchdown passes to it was not good. And this year he's improved. In the offseason, there was a lot of talk about him improving. The first game against Northern Illinois, which is not a slack opponent, I understand that they're not a Power 5, but they're not a slack opponent. I actually had a buddy who we picked games, and he picked Northern Illinois to knock off Iowa. But he did not have a fantastic showing. They won. I got to look it up just a second.
I think it was 33-7.
Yeah, 33-7, but they only had 143 passing yards, which is a lot. It was supplemented by the fact that they had over 200 rushing yards with 3 rushing touchdowns. But Nate Stanley did not have a great game. And I think that they're going to I think the Hawkeyes are going to rely on him a lot to be able to beat the Cyclones this year. Even though it is in Iowa City, I still have Iowa State winning.
Okay. Well, this has been a situation between these two teams where clearly Iowa has had the much, much better football program. But for some reason, Iowa State plays them close. That's rivalry for you. That's also the style of play that Iowa typically puts on the field. And then last year, we didn't know it at the time, but they were evenly matched. Little did we know what Iowa State was going to accomplish the rest of the season. And now we come into this year, and for me, this game's a toss-up. I'm going to have to think this one long and hard. I tend to think Iowa might be a little bit better, but I believe the game's a toss-up. And with Iowa at home, who knows? We'll be predicting the game at some point, but yeah, I did not see Nathan Stanley last week. I didn't see the Iowa game, but 26 touchdowns, 6 picks. I saw him play several times last year. Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, the bowl game against Boston College, and he's got one of the best tight ends in the land, and Noah Fant. Exceptional defensive front. They've got a kind of an uneven team in that they really got hit by graduation losses at linebacker and cornerback. Lost one of the best in the business in Josh Jackson. They lost their center moving to the NFL, James Daniels. But then they are extremely strong in certain categories. Wide receivers aren't great, but they're stable. They come back. Nick Easley in particular. Noah Fant, as I mentioned, maybe the best tight end in college football. The defensive front's really good. So David Montgomery against that defensive line should be certainly key in this one. Can you give us some insight into the rivalry itself? What makes this one special besides two schools that don't have to travel too far to play each other?
Well, it's just like you said. That's the main part is, of course, it's the fact that they're in the same state. But one of the biggest things that a lot of people across the country don't know is that, as usual with the state-sponsored schools, as Iowa State versus just Iowa, Iowa State is the one that has an agricultural program and they've been the backbone of Iowa agriculture for as many years as they've been a university. The biggest thing that always shows up in Cyhawk Week every year is Iowa State has a hashtag and Iowa has a hashtag. Iowa started in the 80s, is ANF, America Needs Farmers. They used to have the tag on the back of their helmet that said ANF, and they started it. I don't believe, or I don't remember which year it was in the '80s, but they played in a huge Rose Bowl game, and that's when everybody brought it out. Was ANF means America needs farmers, because we were having a huge agricultural drop in the nation at the time. The biggest thing that Iowa State felt like it was a slap in the face, because we're the agricultural college. And so I don't know when AHF was actually formed, but it's come. The biggest thing, it happened again last year. Matt Campbell in his second year actually threw it out there, throw some shade at the Hawkeyes. America, or actually helping farmers, is what AHF stands for. So it's become a big thing that the school who actually helps farmers is not the one who was known for starting the agricultural movement in Iowa. And I saw another tweet today that somebody said Iowa would have nothing to hold over Nebraska if they didn't talk about how good Iowa's corn was. So you're welcome for that. It was from an Iowa State account.
You only get that in the Iowa State, the Cyhawk game. And there is a trophy involved as well, correct?
Yes. I can't. I just completely forgot the name of it as you brought it up.
It's not real important. I would guess it's the Cyhawk Trophy. No?
Like I said, I blanked. Yes, that sounds right. I can't even think of what it's named or what it looks like right now. I'm sorry.
Well, that's all right. Again, not important. We're talking football. We don't need to have any trophy experts on, because for as much as college football as I watch, I don't know what the trophies are. I could name about 4 right now. And there's about 50 of them out there. The game will be on Fox at 5:00 Eastern time. Iowa State. I think it's going to be close. Are we expecting big defensive effort or points to be scored like last year?
The over-under on points, I do believe, is 44. Last year was a fluke, to my knowledge, because usually the game is like the team who wins is 27 at the most. So, well, if it's close anyway. Iowa's had some big blowouts. This year, like I said, the over and under is 44. I really think it's going to be close, but I think it'll be an over. Like I said, Iowa State wins it, in my opinion, but I do believe it'll be less than a touchdown, maybe 28-24, something like that.
Iowa, of course, won last year, as we've mentioned many times, 44-41. In 2016, the Hawkeyes won 42-3. In 2015, Iowa won 31-17. I remember that game. There was a big pick six late in the game. Desmond King, 20-14. The Cyclones won 20-17 against the Hawkeyes. In 2013, Iowa won that game 27-21. 2012, 9-6, Iowa State a winner. In 2011, it was Iowa State a winner as well, 44-41. So there's 2 consecutive wins for the Cyclones. Iowa winner the year before, 35-7, 35-3, and some other big wins. 17-5. Hawkeyes lost in 2007, 15-13. But it seems as though it's about a 7-3 every 10 years, something in that range. But Iowa State, if they continue on the track that they established last year, will even out the series here over the next several years, you would think. Got Corey Peters on the line. Yes, sir.
The biggest thing about that, I believe, is Matt Campbell. As everybody's preached, I don't want to say savior, but he has been the guy to turn the program around this time. And there was a lot of people that were thinking that he may leave after the season if Urban Meyer's job becomes vacated. But I don't think that he's the kind of guy that would go to that type of situation. I don't hold Iowa or Ohio State in high regard as far as morals come. And I know that Matt Campbell's a morals guy. So I think he's going to stick it out. I'm not sure. I don't want to say that I hope he leaves, but he's a guy who deserves a blue blood Big John job, in my opinion.
So I have no idea if what you just said is correct. None of us will unless it actually transpires, or he's offered the Ohio State job, and that could be confirmed if Urban Meyer's let go. Some people do speculate that even though Urban Meyer was spared his job, that there's bad blood there, and he may be shown the door or want to leave following this season. We'll see. He just wants to hang on to a football team that could win a national title this year. But yeah, so you're saying Ohio State throws 5 or 6 million at Matt Campbell. He doesn't take it.
I think he does. I want to say that he doesn't, but
Okay.
to be completely honest, I wouldn't turn it down.
Okay, I was just thinking he's got not, and maybe he wouldn't because of what you just stated, but having the opportunity to take one of the 3 or 4 best jobs in the country, I would think he would take it.
You would imagine. Like I said, he's a morals guy, and I never held Ohio State in high regard as far as morals come. So there's that big decision for him. But like you said, you throw $5 or $6 million at somebody, and it's tough to say no.
Yeah, when I look across college football, I'm not necessarily seeing anybody take the moral high ground when it comes to any wrongs done or admittance thereof. But all right, we got Corey Peters on the line talking Iowa State football with the Cyclones taking on the Hawkeyes. Should be a really good win coming up on a Saturday. We've got USC talk coming up at 9 o'clock Eastern time. 2 guests coming up to talk USC and Stanford. So definitely join us for that. We will shut down this live stream and be right back with some USC football talk. Corey, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It was a pleasure.